So, very good afternoon to all of those people who are attending this program. Myself, Siddharth, ഞാൻ practicing cost accountant ആണ്. I am from Thrissur. And I'm very much thankful to Shabir Ali for conducting such a session, especially for which will be useful, especially for CMA students. So, as our topic is mainly the importance of practical training, is practical training compulsory for the students who are pursuing CMA? Of course, even at the earlier times itself, even when I was a student, the CMA Institute has issued a notification, a circular regarding conducting this practical training for the CMA students. So, practical training in the കാലാവധി എന്ന് പറയുന്നത്, the duration of practical training was only 6 months. Was only 6 months, and that too, it was not so compulsory. Some of those students were pursuing practical training and others was not doing it. But later on, the institute was so adamant on making the practical training compulsory for all those people who are going to attempt their final examinations. And very recently, way back in a circular number 128 bar T bar 2 2019-20, that circular issued by the Institute of Cost Accountants of India, in I think it was issued in February 2019. And in that particular circular, I think during the time of CMA, I don't remember exactly his name. So even in the time of the immediate past president, it was that time when the CMA Institute made this circular, and the duration of practical training has now been increased from 6 months to 15 months. 15 months. So, and Pinida practical training, this practical training was made compulsory. The duration of 6 months was increased to 15 months for those people who are going to register way back in December 2020. That was a circular saying. And unfortunately, with the advent of Corona and other issues, the institute, for the time being, the institute is a bit soft in making this practical training compulsory. Yes, even though the practical training is made mandatory, I don't know how many of the students are doing it. And I'm just referring back to circular number 128 issued in 2019-2020, February 19th, February 2019. That was when the circular was issued. And the circular makes it very clear that practical training is mandatory for all those people who have completed their intermediate and who are about to do their final courses. And the duration of practical training has been increased from 6 months to 15 months with effect from December 2020. Sorry, with effect from February, I think, anyway, from December 2020, I believe. So the mostly the doubts in the mind of the students is whether the practical training is for 6 months or whether it is for 15 months. And let me tell you, all those people who have registered recently, for them, recently means in the last 1 year, the practical training has been increased to 15 months. And of course, there is differences of opinion even among some of the members of the institute that practical training should not be made mandatory, and some people say that practical training has to be made, or that has to be increased from 6 months to 15 months. A lot of issues was going on, and somehow the institute has made it very clear that it is going to be 15 months. And way back in 2011, I believe, I don't exactly have that circular with me. Way back in 2011, the institute had issued a circular where it was increased from 6 months to 1 year. And later on, institute itself revoked that particular circular, and they again reduced it to 6 months. And way back in 2019 February, it was again increased to 15 months. So it is actually the institute and its governing council is still has a lot of issues concerning with the practical training of students. Though there is no doubt, because clarification has been made it very clear by the notification and the institute is very much clear that 15 months practical training has to be made compulsory for all those people, all those students who are pursuing CMA final course. Now, as I told you earlier, a lot of confusions, not confusions, differences of opinion. Differences of opinion was still there among some of the students as well as among some of the members. That the practical training is എവിടെയാണ് നമുക്ക് ഇത്രയധികം കോസ്റ്റ് അക്കൗണ്ടൻസ് ഉണ്ടോ പ്രാക്ടിക്കൽ ട്രെയിനിങ് ചെയ്യാൻ, എവിടെയാണ് നമ്മൾ പ്രാക്ടിക്കൽ ട്രെയിനിങ് ചെയ്യുക? അപ്പൊ ഇൻസ്റ്റിറ്റ്യൂട്ടിന്റെ ഗൈഡ് ലൈൻസ് പ്രകാരം പ്രാക്ടിക്കൽ ട്രെയിനിങ് പ്രാക്ടീസിങ് കോസ്റ്റ് അക്കൗണ്ടന്റിന്റെ കീഴിലേ ചെയ്യാൻ പാടുള്ളൂ എന്ന് എവിടെയും നിർബന്ധം പറഞ്ഞിട്ടില്ല. ബിക്കോസ് ഓർഗനൈസേഷൻസ് റെക്കഗ്നൈസ്ഡ് ഫോർ പ്രാക്ടിക്കൽ ട്രെയിനിങ് എന്ന് പറഞ്ഞിട്ട് ഒരു സർക്കുലർ ഉണ്ട്. ആ സർക്കുലർ വളരെ വ്യക്തമായിട്ട് അതിൽ പറയുന്നുണ്ട്, എനി സ്റ്റുഡന്റ്, any final student who is pursuing the final course can do practical training under a practicing cost accountant or a firm of cost accountants in any of the following organizations. So it can be central, state government or semi-government or public utilities, banks, insurance or other financial institution, public sector undertakings, universities, management institutes and any other recognized educational institute, cooperative societies and NGOs. So everything is made it very clear. And one more thing, idonnum possible allengil, if you say that we don't have enough practicing cost accountants, yes, the number of practicing cost accountants in particularly in the state of Kerala is very less, but in India we have ample practicing cost accountants, let me tell you. And the firm of cost accountants may also be a bit less because most of the cost accountants may be doing it as a proprietary concern. Now we have a lot of we have corporations, municipalities, we have a lot of central and state government organizations, semi-government organizations in our locality. So you are also, suppose you can or you are eligible to do your practical training under these organizations as well. There is no restriction on that. You can do your practical training in banks or any other financial institutions, insurance companies, any other public sector undertakings. Or the other option is, the other doubt that normally the students, normally I used to get a lot of queries from our own students, that whether can we do a practical training under a chartered accountant. So that is another thing. Again, the institute has given a guidelines for undertaking practical training under a chartered accountancy firm. Now, if the firm of chartered accountants or company secretaries has separate management consultancy division, and if the applicant has exclusively worked in that division, that will also be considered. So that is another thing. So you are not supposed to undergo your practical training in a chartered accountancy firm. But if you undergo your practical training in a management consultancy, which is run by a group of chartered accountants or a group of company secretaries or a combination of chartered accountants, cost accountants or company secretaries, that is an eligible area. So the only restriction is you are not supposed to do your practical training with a practicing chartered accountant. A chartered accountant who is running a management consultancy company may not have a certificate of practice. He will be a director in that particular company. So that is not a restriction. So you can do your practical training even with chartered accountants. So the problem is most of the students normally say, most of the students and some of the members in fact normally say that we don't have enough opportunities to do practical training. We have ample opportunities. That is a fact. We have ample opportunities for conducting practical training. But the problem is some of the students and even some other members are not really encouraging this activity of practical training. So that is one of the major issues. Now, looking from the perspective of students, let me tell you, practicing it is, if you want to gain practical knowledge in what you are learning theoretically, you must definitely have practical exposure. You must definitely have practical exposure. You may be an expert in taxation. You may be knowing the laws of taxation, let it be income tax or indirect tax. You will be an expert in accountancy. But the question is, do you have a hands-on experience in any of these things? Now, what happens is most of the students who have completed, most of the students, I'm not blaming, I'm not taking it in a general sense, but majority of the students who have completed has not undergone a training because this is mandatory. a training, mandatory training has not been done, because I think some of you may be doing the practical training at this moment, and now I think from February 2019, a separate application forms. When you start your practical training, you will have to apply in T1 form T1, and the time of completion you will have to upload T5. All these has been made mandatory, and I still believe that institute is so keen on making sure that no dummy certificates are being provided. Okay, so even such things are being happening. Now, some of the students used to call me and ask if I can get a practical training experience from one of my friend who is a practicing cost accountant or a chartered accountant. Can I do that? That is, I'm not the right person to say whether you can do it or not. I don't know whether the institute allows it, but let me tell you, from individual perspective, that is not a good thing, because if you want to gain experience, if you want to gain practical knowledge, you should do it practically. Practical knowledge cannot be gained by simply observing what other people are doing inside the organization. And theoretical knowledge is very much essential, of course. Theoretical knowledge is very much essential, but there is a limitation to it. If you want to earn something, ultimately, whoever, let it be a chartered accountant or company secretary or a cost accountant, whoever it is, let's take the case of any professional or any person who is working. Now, ultimate objective of taking a job or working on a job is to earn something. So you will be paid enough only if you have the knowledge in what you do. So ultimately, that is something that each and every student who is pursuing CMA has to keep in mind. Because I don't want to mention CAs and CS, because practical training is mandatory for chartered accountants for, I think it is 2.5 years. And it is also compulsory in case of company secretaries, where it is 18 months. And in case of cost accountants, in case of our institute has now made it 15 months. Anyway, that is a very good sign. That is a very good move. And I really appreciate the initiative taken by the institute and its council for increasing the tenure. Because when I got a chance to speak in the chapters meet during in Kolkata way back in 2018 and way back in 2017 in Kolkata and one in Bengaluru, I got a chance to meet with some of the senior members of the council, and I raised this issue. And of course, there was mixed responses from some of the members. The major reason that was being pointed out was the number of cost accounting firms, the number of practicing cost accountants are very less. I do agree with that, but institute is not so keen. That institute is never saying that you should do your practical training with a practicing cost accountant firm alone. You can do in any institution. There is no restriction to it. You can do in any institution, and simultaneously you will have to upload such certificates or forms to the institute website. That is the only requirement. So if somebody has got such a belief that practical training has to be done along only with a cost accountant, that is not the case. You can do practical training with any of those institutions which is recommended in our website, in the institute website. And I do also request each and every student as well as each and every member to please log into the institute website so that you can get updated yourself with what is happening. And another important thing is, as I told you, some of the students are not undergoing practical training. It's a very rare case. Most of the people are doing it, but some of the few of those people are not taking the practical training. The question is whether practical training is essential. Practical training is essential because, as I told you just before, if you want to get a hands-on experience, if you want to really understand what is happening, that has to be, you must get some practical exposure. Because though the institute is conducting a placement cell, there will be a lot of candidates who are appearing for the placement cell conducted by the institute. And some of your friends or some of your colleagues, if you just look around, you can see that some people may say that I couldn't get placed in the placement cell conducted by the institute. It's because maybe there are though the number of companies who are coming to the placement cell is more this time. I mean, every year the number of companies are increasing. That's a good sign. But there is a limitation to the number of candidates can be taken by each of those companies. So the level of competition is so high. If you want to be competitive, if you want to compete you need to compete in terms of quality. Qualification does matters, but when you go for an interview, uh, a cost accountant will obviously have a competitor from a CA institute, a chartered accountancy student. So these are the two people who mainly compete with each other. Now think about a cost accountant who only has a 6 months experience competing with a chartered accountant who has 2.5 years of experience. That makes a huge difference. So even at the time of interviewing, can see the difference. A person who has gained 2.5 years of practical experience is much more capable of answering the practical scenarios than a person who has gained only 6 months training, 6 months articleship. So 6 months was never enough. 1 year is, it's okay, I should say. If you can increase it to 2 years or 3 years or 2.5 years, that is much more better. As a practicing person, I would always suggest that practical training has to be made mandatory and the tenure of practical training has to be increased to 2.5 years. Not only me, any member who is in practice and any member who is in practice will definitely say that the practical training has to be increased to 2.5 years, because practice cost accountants have got huge avenues. They have got huge avenues. We have definitely got huge avenues in the areas of practice, and I still believe the number of practicing cost accountants are increasing year by year. Now, if you look in Kerala, the number of practicing cost accountants have doubled during the last 2 years. That's always a positive sign. So, if you want to create that demand for cost accountants in industry, the quality of the students, the quality of the cost accounting students, those students who complete their final stages of CMA should definitely improve. I don't say that these people doesn't have any quality. I'm not telling that, but there are cases where some of the students miserably fail in front of the interviewing board because they don't know what is happening practically inside an organization. So practical training is very much essential, and definitely I should say that I run a practicing cost accounting firm in Thrissur, and I do have 10 articles in my office. And let me tell you, one of the few things that I need to tell you is I was from my office, fortunately, during this period of Corona, fortunately, I was able to give job to two of my trainees who have completed 1.5 years of experience in my organization. And one has already been placed in a manufacturing company and he is earning a salary of 30,000. He's only an intermediate qualified person with 1.5 years of training, and another is almost to be get placed in another organization because his confirmation has not yet been received. So I'm not telling that, but again, he's also getting a payment of around 25 to 30. So this makes a difference. Whereas few of my very close students, they were able to get a job only. They are final qualified, but unfortunately, they couldn't get placed through the placement cell conducted by the institute because of this corona and other things. And unfortunately, they are working for a very low amount, a low salary in the nearby places. It's an unfortunate thing. But again, I should tell you that practical training is what makes you different from other candidates of the same profession. So practical training is much more, it is mandatory, and the only thing is the students who are pursuing the course, CMA final course, should take it very seriously. Never think that qualification is more important than practical training. That is a misunderstanding. Somebody has misguided you in that sense, I will say. Yes, qualification is essential, but especially along with qualification, it is very much essential that you should attain ample training, ample practical knowledge, which is going to get you good job. So that makes a huge difference. Anyway, so this is from my part. So if you ask me whether practical training is important, of course practical training is very much important, not for the members, not for a member like me who has qualified, but for a upcoming cost accountants. Practical training is essential, and definitely I would say that each and every person, each and every student who is attending this, who is going to listen to this, must definitely do a practical training of minimum 1.5 years, minimum 1 year and 6 months. Please do it, because definitely the question is, should I waste 1.5 years or should I pursue my final course before that? I would definitely suggest that once you undergo a practical training of 1 year and 6 months or 2 years, I will say that you don't need to attend the classes for final stages, because you will definitely gain exposure to hands-on experience in income tax, GST, that is indirect taxes, cost audit, and accounting standards, everything. You will get a hands-on experience to all these things. Now, why should you go to the classroom and listen to the final classes? You can just attend only those classes which you require. Now, that is where the quality of the final students has to be improved. Now, some people have a belief that attending the final classes, once I attend the final classes, let me qualify, then I'll gain practical experience. That is not a good thought. Because when you go to the interview, when you sit in front of the interview board, definitely they are going to ask you some questions, because as per the notification issued by the institute, you are not supposed to write the final exams without conducting the practical training. Now, without completing the practical training, how did you appear for the final examination? That is another question. So definitely there is in your biodata, in your CV that you have prepared and presented in front of the interview board, you have said that you have got practical exposure to such and such areas. Now, when you get some practical questions from those areas, you will not be able to give a proper reply to them. That is not a good sign. That will definitely degrade the quality of the profession, the quality of the institute. So that should never happen. So it is a moral responsibility of each and every student and each and every member. The responsibility of each and every student is to make sure that you don't attempt the final classes without pursuing a compulsory training of 1.5 years or 2 years minimum. That is your responsibility. And as a member, from my responsibility as a member is that members like me should always encourage the students to pursue training. Never allow the students to drop out training, or never allow them to attend the final classes without attempting the training sessions. So this is a response. So both the members and the students has got equal responsibility in improving the quality of the profession and the professional institute. Okay, so that is from my part. I think I'll hand over the same to Shabir.